We're here with another Battlesnake developer tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at Go. Yesterday we did a couple of these looking at Python specifically, but today we're going to take a look at using Go to build your first Battlesnake. So today we're going to be running a developer tutorial for getting up and running, kind of creating your first snake. Like if you've never done Battlesnake before, this will get you running a snake live on the website and programming it primarily in Go. There's not none of what I do today is going to be Go specific. It's just the examples that we run through is going to be in Go. We did one yesterday in Python. We're going to do one in JavaScript and TypeScript later on this week, and also a couple other languages. But the core concepts hold regardless of what language you're using. Let's talk a little bit about what Battlesnake is. So Battlesnake is a programming game. I'll go full screen here. Battlesnake is a programming game based on the game Snake. If you are over a certain age, you'll remember these Nokia phone games where you move around a grid and you eat food and you try to survive as long as possible. So the game itself is very simple. What we do is we let developers program their own snake to play the game, and then we put a whole bunch of snakes on the same board. So this makes it way more challenging and way more interesting from a gameplay, from a strategic point of view. So what developers do in order to actually play the game is you write a web server, create a web server. You deploy it to the internet, and you just have to make sure that it implements the Battlesnake API, which is very simple, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the point here is that your snake is, instead of you sitting there taking turns and deciding to go up, down, left, right, your program, your web server is going to make the decision for you. And so how you program your web server is going to ultimately decide how well your snake does in the game. You can try this for yourself if you sign up at battlesnake.com. You can follow along. I'm going to try to flip back and forth between the live website. So you should be able to follow along and create your own snake as we do this. Here's the... Sorry, there's a bit of delay there. There we go. Here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about the rules and objectives of Battlesnake. We're going to talk about programming your snake and how to get started with that. We're going to talk about how to deploy your snake. Specifically, we're going to deploy to Heroku, which is a really great platform for getting started programming. And then I'm going to dive a little bit into how to customize your snake and how to make your snake smarter and kind of set you off on a good path to get going there. What we're not going to do today is cover any advanced techniques or strategies. There will be more content on Twitch later this week and next week that will talk more about advanced pathfinding algorithms, advanced tactical algorithms for playing the game, as well as if you want to get into machine learning or AI or reinforcement learning. There's going to be more tutorials that are going to dig into that down the road. Let's dive in here. So let's talk about Battlesnake rules and objectives. What I'll also do is, let's just go here. Okay, let's talk about rules and objectives, and I'll show you what a game actually looks like. So if you're familiar with the game Snake, this will all be sort of pretty straightforward and pretty simple. But if it's your first time seeing this, then it's kind of important to understand how the game actually works. So Snake is played on a grid. It doesn't have to be square, but most of the time it's square. And your snake is going to move around the board and try to survive as long as it possibly can. There's a couple different ways your snake can be eliminated. One is if your snake moves off the board, so outside the boundaries of the game, which it can do. There's no walls in place to kind of keep you in. It's up to you to program your snake in a way that that keeps it on the board. If you move out off the board, then your snake will be eliminated, and you will not win the game. You also, your snake has health. So your snake starts the game with 100 health, and then on every turn, your snake's going to lose 1 health. And you'll see this on the game board in a second. Of your health will decrease slowly as the game continues. If your snake ever reaches 0 health, then it will be eliminated also. So you need to make sure that your snake never reaches 0 health. And the way you do that is by eating food. So these red food pellets are going to show up and pop up on the game board throughout the game. And every time your snake moves over one of those, it will consume it, and its health will reset back to maximum, back to 100% or 100 health. The side effect of eating food, though, is that your snake's going to get longer. So if you look here in the image, the animation on the right, every time the snake eats food, it grows by 1 additional length. And so this means that as you eat food to stay alive and to stay healthy, you're going to take up more and more space on the board, and it's going to get harder and harder to survive. The reason it gets harder to survive is because you cannot collide. You're not allowed to collide with yourself or other snakes. So if your snake runs into your own body, or if you run into the body of another snake, you will be eliminated. So the goal here, when you're programming your snake, is to find out where the empty space is, where the safe empty space is, and make sure that you're moving in a direction that will keep you alive for as long as possible. It's a little bit trickier than it sounds, but it's pretty easy to get started for sure. The other condition we should mention is head-to-head collisions. So if there are going to be other snakes on the board, obviously, if you run into their body, you'll be eliminated. If they run into your body, you'll be eliminated. But if you both collide head-to-head, as is happening in this example, one of two things are going to happen. First, if you are the longer snake, then you will win. You'll win the head-to-head collision, and you will survive. And the shorter snake will be eliminated. So that's what's happening in the example here on the right. The longer snake that's moving up wins the head-to-head, and the shorter snake is eliminated. This gives you it gives you some options, right? When it comes to strategy and gameplay, you can choose to eat more food sooner, which gives you an advantage over other snakes in this situation. It gives you the opportunity to go and seek out and try to actively eliminate other snakes if you want to. But eating food also makes you longer, so it makes it harder for you to stay alive longer and manipulate space on the board. So there's advantages and disadvantages, and different teams and different developers use that in different ways. But we won't worry about the strategy so much, just as like the game mechanics are, don't try to avoid head-to-head collisions that you're going to lose. And then, of course, the last snake left on the board is the winner. And this is always the case for Battlesnake. So there's no prize for second place in Battlesnake. You have to outlast all your opponents in order to win the game. That's the core mechanic. That's the core gameplay. I'll show you an example of what this looks like live on the website right now. So if I go to battlesnake.com, I have an account here. I can go create game. I'm gonna just turn off. There we go. So we're going to create game. You'll see here, there's all the snakes, all the battle snakes that I've created and that I run personally under my account are available here on the left. So say I want to add some of these to a game. I can say, let's add down snake, let's add up snake. I can also search for other people's snakes that they've made, and they've made them public. So for example, I know that a friend of mine has a snake that's public, so I can add that one to the game. And let's also let's do a random snake. So the third way you can add a snake to the game is you can just click this add a random battle snake button. So this will just take a random public snake within the system, and it will add it to your game. And then on the right here, I can choose my board size. I can choose 7x7, 11x11, or 19x19. If I want, I could choose a custom board, and so I could make a rectangular board if I wanted to. If I could make a larger board if I wanted to. For the purposes of this tutorial, we're just going to stick to medium because I think it's probably the easiest, and it's the default option, and it's also for the Stay Home and Code event. It's all the arenas and all the tournaments are going to be run on a medium board, so it's the best way to get started. Let's so now I've got this game set up. I've got 4 snakes in this game. I'm going to hit start. This is what the game looks like at the beginning. So On the right here, you've got all the health bars and the names and the lengths of the snake. So you can see down snake in this green is length 3, and it's got 100% health. And all snakes have 100% health, and they're all length 3. You can see on the left here on the game board where they're all starting and where the initial food is. I can hit play, which is the play button right here, and it'll show me how the game went. And so you can see right off the bat, down snake is programmed just to go down. It's just good for debugging. So down snake immediately goes down and then loses a head-to-head with this other random snake that we added. Up snake just goes straight up and goes right off the board and then gets eliminated. So bottom tier Boomba in this particular game was the winner. It was the one that survived longer than any other snakes. You can, for any game, you can reload it, which resets it to turn 0. You can play it, you can pause it. You can also go back and forth frame by frame using the arrow keys, so I can look at very specific turns if I wanted to. It's very convenient for debugging. So if you want to be like, what decision, like why was my first move up? And I could look at my server logs, or I could look at my algorithm, look at my code and be like, okay, my snake went up in this situation. And I could go take a closer look at why it made that decision. The other thing that's really useful, there's a couple useful buttons down here. One is you can export the game as a GIF. So if you have a game that you think is particularly interesting or exciting, you can create a GIF of it and share it. You can also share a link to the game, and you can also create a rematch of games that you create. So if I go here to the create rematch, this is going to start a brand new game of Battlesnake. Different starting positions. This is a different game using the same snakes, and so we'll see who wins this time. It looks like bottom tier Boomba manages to win again. Up snake goes right off the board. The random snake goes off the board, and then down snake just runs down and goes off the board as well. So clearly, bottom tier Boomba is the only snake that has any sort of intelligence in this game, and that's why it's winning. That's I'll talk more about the game board and how to run games as we're going through the tutorial, but that's kind of an overview of how the games actually work. Let's talk about. We'll jump back here and we'll talk about how to actually program your snake. Before we do that, I'll swap over to the camera, and if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and ask them in Twitch chat, and we'll try to get answers. I don't see anything coming through. Obviously, you're also welcome to ask questions throughout the stream. Someone says, why use Go? You should use whatever language you're comfortable with. We're using Go here just so that we can, so that any developers that want to use Go can have a good starting point. But you don't have to use Go. You can use any language you want as long as you can deploy a web server somewhere. All right, let's get into actually programming a snake here. All right, programming your snake. Let's talk about this. So, like I mentioned, to play the game, you'll be writing and deploying a web server that plays the game on your behalf. And this means that each snake is actually a unique URL that implements the Battlesnake API. So you're deploying your code somewhere live to a web server, and then you'll be creating a snake using that URL. And it's up to you to make sure that you've properly implemented the API. The API itself is actually super simple. There's only 4 commands. They are the start command, the move command, the end command, and the ping command. So the start command you're going to get at the start of every game. It's just telling your snake that, hey, a game started, your snake is in this game. If you want to do anything before the game starts, here's your chance. And so you'll get that signal. You don't have to reply to that if you don't want to. That's sort of an optional command. The end command, I'll jump over move for a second. The end command is very similar. It just tells you when the game is finished, and it will give you some information about which snake won. So the start and end commands tell you that games have started and games have ended. The ping command is used by the game engine to make sure that your snake is still alive. So it'll call it at various points throughout the cycle of a game or throughout the cycle of arena. You just have to respond with a 200 to that to make sure that to just tell us that your snake is still alive, and we'll make sure that we enter you into games then. The bulk of the game and the bulk of your programming is going to happen in the move command here. Right in this move command. You're going to receive that command every turn, once for every turn of the game. And so inside that command, you're going to get some information about the board and where the other snakes are and where you are, and you're going to reply with whether you want to move up, down, left, or right. I'll show you an example of that. Here's an example of the move command here. So on the left is what you'll receive in the command, the information that you'll have to make the decision, and on the right is how you will respond. So you'll receive a game ID, which is a unique identifier for that particular game. You'll be told the height and width of the board, so you know where the boundaries are. You'll be told what turn you're on, if you're on turn 1 or turn 4 or turn 1000 or whatever. You'll also get information about the other snakes that are playing and where they are, so you'll know where the other snakes are and where the unsafe squares are. Food locations, so you'll know the coordinates of all the food as well as your snake ID. And you're supposed to, what you're going to be doing is programming this function to take that as input and then reply or respond with one of up, down, left, or right. And that'll be your move for that turn. Let's talk quickly about the game board and the coordinate system. So 0, 0 is actually in the top left. We do that for a couple of reasons. It doesn't really matter why, as long as you know that that's how it is. So 0, 0 is in the top left, and then width and height, max values will be in the bottom right. And that'll help you position where your snake is on the board in code. There's a couple other technical notes we should talk about. One is that you must respond with a 200, with an HTTP 200. If you do anything besides a 200, we're going to ignore your response. You also only have 500 milliseconds to respond, which is actually a lot of time. If you're using any sort of cloud hosting or any sort of modern hosting technology, 500 milliseconds should not be a problem whatsoever. It's only going to matter if you're trying to super hyper optimize your decision making or maximize your compute time, which are all pretty advanced techniques. So if you're just getting started, just know that your snake has to respond within 500 milliseconds, but it won't be that difficult to do. If we receive any errors, so if either you don't 200 or you don't get a response within 500 milliseconds, your snake will just move forward. We'll take whatever your last move was and we'll reapply that to the next turn. If it's the first turn of the game, I believe you just go up. I believe we'll just assign you a move of up, even if that means you'll be eliminated. So we'll move you forward even if that runs you into another snake or if that runs you off the board. So your goal is to not return errors as much as possible, obviously. If you're worried about latency or you want to care about how we're implementing the game engine is actually running in AWS US West 2, which I believe is Oregon. So if you are worried about round trip latency, or if you're choosing a region to run your snake, that might be a good choice. But also, pretty much anywhere will be okay. You'll be within that 500 milliseconds. I wouldn't worry about it too much. All this information is available at docs.battlesnake.com. I see there's some questions in the chat as well. I'll pull this up. Let's stop sharing for a second. So there's a question of, can the slides be available for downloading later? And then someone else said, what are the default stay home and code event? Awesome. Okay. So the slides won't necessarily, we might make them available, and we could, but all this information is actually already available in probably a better format if you go to docs.battlesnake.com, which is this website here. On the left, there's a getting started guide. There's a full game rules, which talks about everything I just talked about, talks about the game board, how we resolve turns. It's all pretty well documented. There's also API docs for the full API. So if you want the full details on how the API works, there's a lot of detailed information here on docs.battlesnake.com. We might release the slides, but you're better off just going to docs.battlesnake.com. It'll all be there. Second question looks like the mods jumped on that one. Awesome. Okay, let's actually do some programming. That's what we're all here for. So if you go to the docs, you'll see, let's go here. We give you a bunch of code to get started. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so I'm here on the docs page. There's starter snakes in the menu. So if I click on starter snakes, these are official starter snake projects that we create, that our team creates and makes public for you to use. And they're just intended to get you up and running really quickly. There's 5 of them that are available right now. There's one for Go and Java and JavaScript, Python and Ruby. So if you're familiar with, if you're comfortable with any of those 5 languages, there'll be a really good starting point for you to get started with. There's also a couple that our community has put forward. So there's one in Kotlin. If you want to use Kotlin, there's one in Rust. There's another one that uses Node on Azure, which is great. If you want to use Azure, that's awesome. And then there's another one that was created by the AWS Labs team that uses SageMaker. So if you want to get into AWS AI or AWS reinforcement learning, there's a really good starter project for you to get going there. And you can find all this again on the docs. We're going to take a look at the Go one, which is here. So if I click that link, I'll go to the Starter Snake Go project, and I can see it's actually really, really small. So there's like some GitHub stuff, a Heroku file, my Go mod. And so there's actually only one file of Go code here. It's main.go. And you'll also see the README has full instructions. So I'll be covering the main contents of the README in this tutorial, but it's all there and you can go take a look at it. To use this Starter Snake, it uses Go 1.13. You don't actually need Go installed because we're going to be running our code on Heroku. You can have it installed if you want, and you could do some more advanced things with that, but you don't need it installed. It's just letting you know that that's what it's used. That's the technology it's using. And we also use Heroku to deploy our snake. To get started, you'll need a GitHub account. You'll need the Git command line installed. You'll also need a Heroku account and the Heroku command line installed, and you'll need a Battlesnake account. So I'm going to move forward assuming that you've got those 5 things in place. It's all pretty easy to set up, and there's links here to the documentation if you want to. Let's actually try to use this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clone the repo to our local environment. So git clone, and then the clone URL. If you're familiar with how Git or GitHub works, this is straightforward stuff. So I have the Starter Snake Go project locally, and I'm going to open it up in my editor. Awesome. Okay. Let's take a look at main.go, which is the one Go file that I mentioned is actually in here. Let's also pop open a terminal. So there's a couple things in here. If you're familiar with Go, it shouldn't look too scary. Let's take a look on line 67. So there's this handle index function that just says your Battlesnake is alive. Let's make a quick. Actually, let's just deploy and see if we can get this thing actually deployed on Heroku. So this handles the index, so it handles the root URL for this web server and just says your Battlesnake is alive. To actually deploy this to Heroku, which is what we're going to be using to host and run our code, you can just do Heroku create, which will create a new Heroku app for you. Super quick, it's already done. And you can do git push Heroku master, which is going to take my local code and deploy it to Heroku for me. Heroku is going to compile it. It's going to start up the server. It's going to complain about some stuff that I don't care about. And then it's going to give me a URL for where that, let's do this, for where that code is going to be hosted. So we'll give Heroku a second here to get that code live. Awesome. All right, so it's done there. We'll go back to our browser. We'll get rid of this. Open up a new tab, and there we go. So we see at this URL, and you could go to this URL if you wanted. You'd see your Battlesnake is alive as well. So this snake that I just created is live now on Heroku, running my code, which is awesome. I can also I can look at the /ping URL, and you'll see that's this function right here being called, which just returns with a pong. So my code is now running. My starter snake is now live. I can take this URL and let's add my Battlesnake. So I'll go to my Battlesnakes. We're going to name this Battlesnake. So if anyone in Twitch chat has an idea of what we should call it, type it in now, and then we'll add it when we get there. If I go to, so I'm just looking at my profile, I can say create new Battlesnake. In the URL field here, I'm going to paste the URL that Heroku gave me in the description. I can give a bit of information about the snake, about what algorithms it uses or what technology it's using. I'm going to write coded Go on Twitch. I can also add tags, so tags for specific technology I'm using. In this case, I'm using Heroku, I'm using Go, and then there's a checkbox here to allow anyone to add the snake to a game. This will make the snake public so that other Battlesnake developers can add it to the game if they want. If they searched for it, they could find it and add it to their game. I'm gonna leave that off for now, just so that other people aren't creating games against the snake. But what should we? I'll go back to chat here. What should we call this snake? If there's anyone that has ideas of what we should do, it can be anything. It just has to be unique within the system. I'm not seeing anything. Snacky McSnack face. It's a good one. I mean, Snack is obviously a very common choice. John Rando. I like John Rando too. Let's go with McSnack face. There we go. All right, so we'll just type in McSnack face there as my name. Thanks, little helper boat, and we'll hit save. I'm gonna hit save. You'll see the snake shows up in my list here at the bottom, McSnack's face. It says coded in Go on Twitch, and I've got my Go and Heroku tags there. I can go into the snake, and it says I haven't played any games yet, which is great. Okay, because I just made it, so obviously I haven't played any games. Let's go create game. This automatically goes to the game creation, and I can see McSnack face is already added. Let's add a couple other snakes for fun. Let's add a down snake and an up snake. Just for like some easy opponents for me to sort of try to program against. And we will start this game. So here we are. We'll play the game, and we won. Awesome. Awesome. That's fantastic. So if you look, up snake in the purple immediately goes up and runs off the board. Down snake in the green immediately goes down and runs off the board, and McSnack face wins the game. So fantastic. Yeah, let's retire McSnack face now that we're infinitely undefeated. Let's try a couple more games. We can create a rematch. See how we do. That one we didn't do as well. Down snake went off, up snake went up, and then both snakes actually ran into each other. So if you look here, McSnack face was in this position, and it looks like it decided to go up, and so it collided with its own body, with its own neck right away. We haven't even looked at what the snake does. We've just deployed the starter snake to get it live, but it gives you an idea of, you can run these games right away. Before we start making it smarter, let's make it look different. Let's ties do count as wins. I agree. Let's take a look at the custom ways to customize my snake. So it's currently in this like mid-gray color. It's got a regular looking face and a boring tail. Let's do something better than that. And there's a couple different ways you can customize your snake. If you look in the docs, let's go here. In the docs, there's this customizing your snake page, which will show you how you can make it different colors and make it look different. it's all done in the start request. So I mentioned before, the start request happens at the beginning of every game. You can reply to that start command with how you want your snake to look. You can pick a different color, you can pick a head skin, and you can pick a tail skin, and go from there. Let's find that in our code. So on the right here, on line 78, there's this handle start function. It says handle start is called at the start of each game. Your response decides how your Battlesnake is going to look on the board, which is great. That's exactly what we're looking for. In the Go code, I can see response equals start response. It sets a color, it sets a head type, and sets a tail type. So let's decide what we want this snake to look like. Here's, back on the docs, here's all the options. So like regular and block and bolt and curled tails and different tails options. Let's have, if someone in chat wants to shout out what they want the snake to look like. I'm going to go find a color. Let's just take this color here. Let's take this like teal color. All right. Someone in chat says round bum and block bum. Let's go round bum for tail. That's a good one. And then let's do pixel for head. We'll do silly. Fine, we'll do silly. All right. So here's what I've done: is I've changed my color, I've changed my head type, and I've changed my tail type, and I've done nothing else to this code. Those are the only things I've changed. I can go back down to my terminal. I can do git. If you're familiar with git and how to actually commit, you have to commit your changes locally and then push them to Heroku. So you do that with 3 commands. So every time you want to update your snake live on Heroku, you have to run these 3 commands. You're going to do git add dot git commit -m, and then you're going to write a little message about what you're changing. So I'm going to say silly head round bum. And then you're going to run git push Heroku master, which is going to actually tell Git to push your latest changes up to Heroku. So while that's happening, which is actually pretty quick, Heroku's pretty good at getting Go apps live quickly. We'll go back to this game here. And we'll see if we can create a new game with our better looking snake. Awesome. So I got the message from my command line that Heroku's got the new code. I'm going to create a rematch on battlesnake.com. And there we go. I can see McSnack face is this teal color that we chose. It's got the silly head. And then if I go forward, it's got the round bum tail, which is great. In this game, again, it just immediately goes off the board. But now we've got a way, like we know that we can deploy our code and we can change the way our snake behaves and change the way our snake looks, which is great. It's a good starting point. Let's take a look at what it's actually doing. So in this game, snake goes down and then right and then runs off the board. Let's take a look at the move command and figure out how our snake is making that decision. So if I go to line in the starter snake, in the Go starter snake, it's line 96. You'll see this handle move function. It says handle move is called for each turn of each game. Valid responses are up, down, left, or right, and I'm supposed to use the information in the move request object, which is right here, to determine my next move. And if you look at the code, it says choose a random direction to move in. So it creates a slice of the up, down, left, right options, and then all it's doing is setting move equal to a random one of those options, and then it's returning the move. So it's basically, McSnack face is currently just moving randomly around the board. It's also it also prints this move before it exits the function. So I can actually use Heroku logs to take a look at the output of that print statement. So I can do Heroku logs web.1-tail. There you go. So you can see right here, I'll reset this game. Here's the start command that my snake got. On turn 1, it moved down. So if I go back to the game and I go look at turn 1, we move down. Then it goes right, and then right, right, and then right, and then runs off the board. So it gets the end command right away. So now we can see the decisions, the random decisions that our snake made. Let's see if we can change this a little bit. So let's do, instead of just moving randomly, what if we set move just to right? Let's just hard code it to right and see if we can get our snake to just go right. Let's do git add move right always. So maybe this will do a little bit better than just randomly moving. At least we won't run into ourselves. Push Heroku master. It didn't like something. And what did it not like? Push restricted failed to compile. Let's see here. What am I missing? My guesses that I've got. Do you need to unimport random? Yes, that is what it is. I'm going to cheat though. Let's do that. That's great. Thanks, Zardos. There we go. So I get around having to unimport random just by reassigning. Oh, no, it's not going to like it that time either. Let's do this. Assignment. Push. Sorry, there we go. Go is pretty strict as a language, so if you're familiar with Go, you'll understand what these errors are, and like if Heroku can't compile your code, then it can't run it, obviously. But there we go. We managed to get around that. You can also, like, if you're comfortable, you can run your code locally and you can test these things a little bit faster. But Heroku will also do it for you. Okay, so that's done. So let's go to let's create a new game. Let's bring up our logs. So there we go. Let's create Rematch. There you go. So McSnack face here on the right goes right twice. So you can see in the logs, it started the game, it moved right, and then ended, and then it wins because up snake goes off the board and down snake goes down below the board. So we immediately win right away. Let's see if we can get a more interesting game. That one, the same thing happens. We win right away, and you can see like the logs here shows the game happening in real time, so I can see how well we're doing. We keep winning. Let's do this here. Let's just bring McSnack face into the game. So this is a game with I create a new game just with McSnack face. I run it, McSnack face runs off the board. That's great. That's what we want. It's just moving to the right. Same deal. Okay, so this is good. This is a good thing. We've got, we're able to control the way our snake moves just by saying move equals right. Someone asked, do you recommend any tools to make local development faster rather than having to push to GitHub every time? Yep, there's a bunch of different stuff. You can look at docs.battlesnake.com. There's some ideas there to get going. You can use tools like ngrok. You can use local Go environments and Docker. You can also run, there's a version of the game engine you could run locally if you want. Those are pretty advanced stuff. So if you're comfortable doing those, I invite you to do them. Absolutely. But if you're just getting started and you're sort of a more junior beginner programmer, this is a good way to get going for sure. This way, you don't even have to install Go on your local dev machine. So let's try to do something that's a little bit smarter. So let's take a look at the information we get. You can see here that for every move, I get this move request object. If I go up to move request, game, turn. So move request has a bunch of information. It has the game object, it has the turn number, it has the board, and it has me. So let's do a couple things. If I look at the docs, see ya, helper boat. If I look at the docs and I go to the Battlesnake API, there's a couple things here. Here's all the information I get, and then it also says, let's do this. Let's try to find out where our head is. So in the move request, I can look at U, which is a snake object. Snake object is up here on line 17. And so for every snake, you get an ID for the snake, you get a name for the snake, there's a health number, and there's also body coordinates. And we know that the body, your body is an array of coordinates. Coordinates are just X, Y values. And so this will have one entry in the array for every piece of for every square that your snake occupies. So let's do a couple things here. We can take a look at that. Just go down here. So let's do this. So we know that our head. So if I go head chords. Equals, so it's going to be request dot view dot body at 0. So your head is the first of those body segments, and your tail is going to be the last one. So they're ordered in the way that you're currently moving. So I know that my head chords are this first one here, and then if I do, let's do this. So if, I'm just trying to do the math in my head. If head chords dot x equals 10, then let's do this. Here's what we're going to do. Let's go right, and then if our head is in the right-hand column, so if head chords.x equals 10, you can just do move equals up. So here's what we want to do. So if we want our snake to go all the way right until it reaches the right edge of the board where its x coordinate is 10, and then we want it to go up instead. So we'll program that like that. You can go here to get add commit. Right, then up, git push master. So this isn't too smart, but we should last longer than we were lasting before. We should still do better. It's just deploying here, and then we'll create a new game and we'll see if we're going in the right direction. It's kind of like step one to programming Battlesnake is always like figure out where your head is, and then you can figure out where you can move to. All right, so that's done. I can create a rematch. I'm going to bring my logs up again. We'll create a game. So I can see the game runs here. And so I immediately move right, and then I go up, and then I go up, and then I run off the board. So I didn't last too long, but it looks like my code is working. We can make another game. We're going to go right and then up and up. And again, you can see in the logs, I go right 5 times, and then I go up twice, and I run off the board. We'll do one more. This one lasts a little bit longer. There you go. So same deal, go right and then run off the board. So that gives you an idea of how you're going to go about programming your snake. And what you can do is like look at this request object, look at this move request object, and see what information. You have a bunch of information. You have, it'll tell you where the food is. It'll tell you where the other snakes are so you can avoid them. It'll tell you where you are. It'll tell you how big the board is. An example of that is this 10. So like, if you know how to program, you'll know that like you shouldn't really hard code that 10 because what if the board's of different sizes? What if it's a 20 by 20 board instead of an 11 by 11? So what you can do is you can do request.board, I believe it is. Request.board.width -1, which is like that's what you actually want here. That's saying like if I'm in the rightmost column, then I want to go up. So that's another way I can use the request information to do something more interesting. You can also do here. Let's do we'll do something else. Let's say we'll move right. Then if we're in the right hand column, we're going to move up. Then let's say if headchords.y equals 0. So if we're in the top row, move equals left. So what this should do is if we deploy this, we'll go right all the way to the right-hand column, up all the way to the top row, and then we'll go left across. We'll still be eliminated because we'll go too far left. But this will just, again, giving you an idea of how I can impact the way my snake moves. We'll call this right, up, left. What I'm curious is like, can we use this snake to defeat some other snakes? Because now we should be able to last pretty long. Let's just deploy into Heroku here. Chat's pretty quiet today. All right, so that's good. I'm going to go back to the game. I'm going to create Rematch. So here's what we're looking for. I'll bring the logs up. Create a new game, and so we should see it go right and then up and then left, and then it gets eliminated, which is great. So that's exactly what happens. It goes right all the way up to the top row. It happens to eat a food, which is great. It just happened to run into one. And then I go left all the way off the edge of the board. So awesome. That gives you an idea of how you can use that move request information to program your snake to make different decisions. And you can get as complex or as simple as you want, right? Like I've shown you, there's a couple different strategies here. One is just like move in one direction. One is, try to move around the board in a pattern that makes sense to you. Eventually, you'll want to start looking at where the food is and trying to go towards it, and you'll also want to avoid other snakes as well. Before we end here, we're running low on time, but I wanted to show off, there's a really interesting strategy that you can do that I like, especially if you're just getting started. You can do, if you take the default random choice, so it says choose a random direction to move in. It creates a slice of up, down, left, right. I'm going to reorder this a little bit and go up, right, down, left. And let's make it so our snake just goes in a circle. So what we want to do is we want to issue each of these commands in order indefinitely. And the way we're going to use that is we're going to use the turn from the move request to know what turn we're on, and we're going to use the turn to decide. So on turn 1, we want to go on turn 1, we want to go up. On turn 2, we want to go right. On turn 3, we want to go down. On turn 4, we want to go left, and we just want to repeat that. So we can do move. I'm going to try to program some Go here. Move equals possible moves at should be request dot turn mod 4. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the move request, which is here, and we can go up here on line 48. So I know move request has a turn property set on it, which is just an integer. And so what I'm doing is I'm saying use the turn divided by 4, give me the remainder, and choose that from that list. So I've got, we'll save that. That's how I'm setting my move. And let's deploy this and see what we get. Let's call this loop snake. If anyone has questions or they want to see specific ideas or specific strategies, throw it in chat and I'll try to talk about it before we go offline here. I've got it's the random thing again. Thanks, Zardos again. Here we go. Okay, so that's deploying. Again, it's pretty quick. And we'll go back to the game here, and then once it's launched, we should be able to create a game and see this new strategy. Perfect. Okay, so I go create rematch. If I look at the logs, we should see log slash there we go. Okay, so if you look, this snake is just going up, right, down, left, just repeatedly throughout the whole game until eventually it loses the game. So let's see what happens. See what that looks like. So there you go. So McSnackface is just going in a loop, and then eventually it runs out of health and it starves and is eliminated. So that's perfect. I'll leave sort of the coding there unless there's specific information that chat wants me to cover. Let's take a look. I'll go back to chat. Brandon says, how do I print all the data in a given request? You can use just standard Go print statements. So here's an example of this. fmt.printf and then move. That's how I'm getting the move information out. You could print any of the request objects. You could print the turn. You could print your snake object. You could print any information and get it out of the Heroku logs and take a look at it. You can also, if you just want to look at what information you have, it's all available in the docs as well. So if you go to the move docs, here's this is a JSON version of it, but it should map to what's in Go already. You can't see what I'm showing, but I'll show you in a second. Yeah, so here's an example of that print statement. You can see that here on line 119. This is just a standard Go format print statement to std out. So you can use that to dump any information you want on each turn, and it'll just show up in the Heroku logs. And then also the docs has full information here. Zardos says, what's the best way to examine requests? It's the same question. Yeah. So same deal. You can print it out or you can look at it in the docs. Devil says, for a simple snake, what would you recommend focusing on first? Avoid walls, then find food, then avoid other snakes. Yeah, I think that's a really good pattern. I think the first thing I would do is try to avoid the walls. That's sort of basic mechanics of like, if you can stay on the board, then you're here. I'll switch off that. If you can stay on the board, you're going to do pretty well. If you can stay on the board, like I did with that loop snake, right? Then the next thing is surviving longer, right? So loop snake survived until it eventually ran out of health. Let's do here. We'll create a rematch. Sorry, when I say loop snake, I mean the looping strategy. So I play this game. I'm doing pretty well. Like I'm surviving all the way to turn 100, and then I run out of health. So the best way to approach this is to like make your snake be a little bit smarter, make it last a little bit longer, and then figure out what's next. So from here, I would say like, okay, how do we figure out how to get food, right? Because that's the next problem that we have is how do we survive longer? How do we reset our health? And so then I'd start looking at where the food is and where I can go get it. And then you're going to start running into other snakes. And so that's a good progression of like, first, avoid the edges, second, find food and stay alive, and third, try to not run into other snakes. What I'll do is I will make, I did this yesterday too, and I think it went well. Edit snake. I'll make this public, so you can add, if you just go to create a game, you should be able to add McSnack face to your own games now. So if you want, you're on play.battlesnake.com. You can just create a game, and then you can type in McSnack, and you can add McSnack face to your own game, and then you can start a game that runs that code. And you'll see in the logs here, some people are running some games. And it'll go. So if you want to, you could use McSnack face as an opponent that you can try to beat, that you can try to outlast. That's all I got. All right. Thanks.